It began on a blistering afternoon when the cicadas buzzed so loud it felt like the trees themselves were vibrating with fury. I had just stepped out from the county cruiser I parked at the edge of my driveway, still in uniform from a double shift, when I saw her Karen. She stood broad and commanding in her floral dress that clung like armor, a stack of HOA papers in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was red, not from the heat but from rage, and she was surrounded by a gaggle of board members who looked like backup dancers for her tantrum. "This is it," she declared loudly enough for the cows grazing near the fence to lift their heads. "This land is now HOA jurisdiction. He refuses to comply, so we're taking it. Mark it off, boys." My jaw tightened as I watched two men unspool yellow tape across the entrance to my property. The same dirt road my grandfather had carved out decades ago with nothing but a tractor and grit. My wife was on the porch, clutching our daughter to her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. A pickup truck slowed on the county road to watch. Neighbors began pulling out their phones, recording the spectacle. It was exactly what Karen wanted: public theater, staged conquest. I walked forward slowly, the crunch of gravel under my boots like a drumbeat. Karen's grin widened as she saw me approach. "Ah, the officer finally comes home. Maybe now you'll respect authority. This land is too valuable to waste on your so-called heritage ranch. The board voted and we're expanding. You're out." She snapped her fingers at the men, who nodded as if her words carried the weight of law. I let her finish her performance, my hands resting on my duty belt. Then I spoke, calm but cutting. "Karen, you just made two mistakes. First, this land isn't under HOA jurisdiction. Not 1 acre, not one fence post. Second, you decided to try this with a county officer standing right in front of you on his own property." Her laughter was shrill, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck rise. "Oh please, don't think your badge protects you from HOA law. We've got bylaws, signatures, everything. You're just a stubborn squatter who thinks he's above the rules." She shoved a paper in my chest, a cheaply printed form with her scribbled signature, and a fake seal that looked like it came off a hobby store embossing kit. That was when I dropped the first truth bomb. I pulled out my phone and tapped the recorder I'd left running as soon as I stepped out of the cruiser. Every word of her proclamation was captured. Every order to seize my land. Every threat to my family. "This," I said, holding the phone up so the neighbors could see the recording light blinking, "is evidence of attempted fraud and unlawful seizure." The crowd stirred. One man whispered, "She's gone too far this time." Karen's smirk flickered, but she doubled down. "You think recording me scares me? The HOA owns this block. We'll win in court. You'll be nothing but a tenant when we're through." Her arrogance oozed, but behind her eyes I caught the first flicker of fear. I didn't give her time to recover. I motioned to the men with the tape. "Step back. You're trespassing on private land. Failure to comply means I treat this as criminal trespass." The men froze, uncertainty dawning as they realized the badge on my chest wasn't for decoration. Karen hissed at them, "Keep going. Don't let him intimidate you." But one by one, they let the tape drop, retreating toward the safety of the crowd. That was when a twist I hadn't expected hit. From behind the group, a familiar face emerged: Deputy Markson, my rookie partner. He hadn't come on duty tonight. He lived 3 streets over. But he had his phone in hand and a look of disgust on his face. "Sir," he called out to me, loud enough for all to hear, "I've got copies of the complaints. Karen's been filing false HOA violation notices for months. She's been trying to push families off their land with fabricated fines." He held up a folder thick with printouts. "We've got her if you're ready." The crowd gasped, and all at once the tide shifted. It wasn't just about me, Anna Marie, it was about everyone. Families Karen had bullied into silence, veterans she fined for flags, single mothers she threatened over lawn height. The evidence was piling higher than her excuses could reach. I turned back to her, voice steady but loud. "Karen, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, filing false legal documents, and trespassing." She shrieked, flailing as I moved in, her arms waving like a windmill. "No, you can't arrest me. I am the law here." Her screams echoed across the pasture, but they were drowned by the cheers of neighbors who had waited too long for this reckoning. The cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, the sound sharp and final. She collapsed against the hood of the cruiser, still spitting venom. "This isn't over. I'll destroy you. I'll take everything." But her words had lost their power. For the first time, she looked small not in size but in spirit. As I read her rights, I felt the weight of generations behind Mimi grandfather who carved this land, my father who worked it, my own daughter who would one day inherit it. This wasn't just about stopping a bully. It was about protecting a legacy, about proving that truth and law stood taller than arrogance and greed. The crowd erupted in applause as the cruiser door slammed shut, Karen's shouts muffled behind the glass. My wife rushed into my arms, my daughter clinging to my side, and in that moment, with neighbors smiling through tears, with the summer wind rustling the trees, I realized the power of one simple act, standing firm against lies. But the night wasn't done yet, because as I turned to thank Markson, a man I trusted with my life, I noticed another figure lingering at the edge of the crowd, a councilman, one who had quietly supported Karen's schemes for years. His face was pale, his phone clenched in his fist, and in his eyes, I saw the truth. Karen wasn't working alone. The moment the councilman stepped into view, the air shifted. The crowd's cheers quieted, curiosity sharpening into suspicion. He was a tall, thin man with a receding hairline and a suit too expensive for this rural corner of the county. His presence alone made my gut twist. Councilman Reeves had been rumored for years to be the invisible hand behind the HOA's most aggressive moves, but no one had ever caught him in the open. And now here he was, sweating under the late sun, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Karen banged her head against the cruiser's window, screaming muffled obscenities, her eyes wild as they locked on him. "Do something. Don't just stand there. You promised." The words sliced through the air like a blade, and Reeves froze, his lips parting but no excuse spilling out. That was the moment the entire crowd realized Karen had just confessed out loud to collusion with him. I stepped forward, my boots grinding the gravel with purpose, the weight of my badge heavy on my chest but my voice steady. "Councilman Reeves, you want to explain what promise she's talking about? Because right now, this whole neighborhood is listening." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones angled toward him, red recording lights blinking like a jury of 100 witnesses. Reeves stammered, adjusting his tie, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Now let's not get carried away. Mrs. Green Karen has a habit of exaggeration. I was merely advising the HOA in a consultative capacity." A laugh broke from someone in the crowd, sharp and bitter. "Consulting? You mean rubber stamping her fake fines while pocketing our dues?" Another shouted. Neighbors closed in, their anger no longer hidden. My rookie partner Markson raised the folder again, flipping to the back. "Funny you say that, Councilman, because I've got records here showing HOA transfers directly to a shell company tied to your name. Care to consult on that?" Reeves paled, sweat dripping down his temple. He raised his hands, his phone trembling. "This isn't the place," he began, but I cut him off, my voice slicing like steel. "The place is exactly here. These people deserve the truth. You enabled her. You gave her power to threaten families, to trespass on land, to forge documents. You thought nobody would notice, but tonight you were dragged into the light." Karen's muffled screams grew louder as she kicked the cruiser window, trying to drown me out. "He's lying. Reeves was in on it from the start. He said we'd take it all his words, not mine." The sheriff's deputies exchanged looks. Reeves threw his hands up, betrayal painted across his face. "You stupid woman. Do you realize what you've just admitted?" The crowd gasped, the final nail hammered into both their coffins. What had begun as an absurd land grab had now exploded into a conspiracy laid bare for everyone to see. I felt my daughter grip my hand tighter, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, is he going to jail too?" My throat tightened, but I nodded. "He will." The sheriff's SUV door opened again, and Sheriff Daniels himself walked back into the circle, his eyes dark with the weight of what he'd just heard. "Reeves, you've got two choices. You can come down to the station willingly, or I can have you escorted in cuffs like your partner here. Which is it?" His voice carried finality, the kind that left no room for weaseling. Reeves glanced at the sea of phones, his career unraveling before his eyes. His shoulders sagged as if the very bones inside him had turned to sand. "I'll come," he muttered. Daniels nodded grimly and gestured to the deputies, who guided him toward a second cruiser. The crowd erupted, not with anger this time, but with the kind of applause born from years of bottled injustice finally uncorked. As the vehicles pulled away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake, I turned to face my neighbors. The recording still blinked on my phone, evidence preserved, but what mattered most was the fire now burning in their eyes. For the first time in years, they weren't afraid. "This is what happens when we stand together," I said, my voice carrying over the murmurs. "They tried to divide us with threats, with lies, with fake authority. But tonight you saw truth wins when we refused to bow." The days that followed were a whirlwind. News vans rolled down our dirt roads, cameras flashing, reporters begging for statements. "Cop arrests HOA vice president on her own power grab" became the headline that spread like wildfire. Karen's mugshot, red-faced and furious, circulated online, drawing laughter and outrage from across the state. But what hit harder were the court filings that followed. With Reeves exposed, the entire HOA's finances were cracked open like a rotten egg. Fraudulent charges, embezzled funds, threats documented in black and white. Families who had suffered silently now had proof strong enough to tear down the whole rotten structure. Karen tried to fight, of course. From her jail cell she filed handwritten letters declaring herself the victim, that the rogue cop had framed her, that the community had turned into a witch hunt. But every time she opened her mouth, another piece of evidence contradicted her. Witness testimonies poured in. Victims of her fines and threats came forward in droves. The court had no sympathy left. The climax came during the trial. I sat in uniform, my wife's hand in mine, as Karen shuffled into the courtroom shackled at the wrists. Her arrogance was gone. She looked older, smaller, her once towering ego crushed under the weight of the truth. Reeves sat beside her, pale and sweating, his lawyers whispering furiously. The prosecutor laid out the case with brutal precision. False documents, fraudulent bylaws, extortion, conspiracy. My recording of that first confrontation played for the jury, Karen's shrill voice declaring her seizure of my land echoing in the hushed courtroom. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty. On every count. Karen collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Reeves stared blankly at the table, his career, his reputation, his life in ruins. The gavel struck, and with it, years of tyranny ended. But the true victory wasn't the sentencing. It was what came after. The county council, shamed by Reeves' corruption, passed sweeping reforms. No HOA could operate without strict oversight. Every fine, every bylaw, every charge had to pass through public review. Transparency replaced secrecy. Accountability replaced intimidation. And our neighborhood? It blossomed. The fear was gone. Families painted their homes the colors they wanted. Veterans flew their flags without hesitation. Children laughed in the yards that had once been patrolled like prisons. The land my grandfather carved remained in my hands, untouched, unthreatened. My daughter's eyes shone brighter when she looked at me, pride replacing fear. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, my wife leaned against me on the porch. "You know," she whispered, "it wasn't just about protecting our land. You showed everyone what real authority looks like." I smiled, the weight of months finally easing. "Authority isn't about control," I said softly. "It's about protecting what's right." And so the story of Karen's downfall spread far beyond our little corner of the county. It became a reminder that bullies fall, that lies collapse, that no title or board can outmatch the truth. So I'll leave it to you, reader. Do you think Karen and Reeves got what they deserved? Or should justice have been even harsher? Share your thoughts. Was this ending enough? Or should people like them face more for the damage they caused?